Welcome, everyone. I'm Tom Farrey with the Aspen Institute's Sports and Society program. Thank you for joining us for the latest installment of our periodic conversation series, Future of Sports. Today, we explore the future of basketball with a focus on grassroots hoops in the U.S. Among team sports, basketball is our most played game. It's popular among boys, girls, kids, and adults on 2 feet and in wheelchairs, enjoyed in gyms and blacktops, in driveways, in formats ranging from games of horse to 5-on-5. That's the strength of the game here, its flexibility and accessibility to those who want to play. But the system that develops talent is underperforming at best and a growing mess at worst. The past 6 NBA MVP awards have all gone to players from outside the US. Nikola Jokic of Serbia, Joel Embiid of Cameroon, and Giannis Antetokounmpo of Greece. That could easily happen again this year if Canada's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander keeps going. On the eve of the NBA All-Star Weekend, we ask how are basketball players developed in the US versus other countries? What learnings can we apply to build a better ecosystem here? In a moment, you'll hear from 5-time NBA All-NBA guard Luka Dončić about the influences that shaped his game growing up in Europe and why his foundation recently published a report on this exact topic. I highly encourage you to read that report. It's called Inside Youth Basketball. As some in our audience know, our program's signature initiative is Project Play, which helps stakeholders build healthy children and communities through sports. We've studied the US sports system for more than a decade and the systems in a dozen peer countries. Our assessment, Luka and his foundation hit all the right notes. My conversation with Luka was taped just one day before he joined the Lakers. Indeed, you're about to watch his very last interview with as a Mav. So no chance. I'm not going to ask about the biggest trade in, I don't know, NBA history. But you will be enlightened just the same. As the best way to really get to know Luka, I think, is to know his journey, which in turn offers insights into how to unlock the athletic and human potential of more young people. After that, we'll chop it up live with insiders and experts who can help us explore solutions proposed in Luka's comprehensive report. Welcome to our program. Appreciate you spending a few minutes with us talking about the future of youth basketball and how you plan to help improve the game. I think probably the best way we can start this conversation, this event, is to understand your pathway. What made Luka, the magical player who captures the imagination of really a lot of people? So take me back to the start. What was your basketball experience like growing up in Slovenia? How were you introduced to the game? Where did you play? What were your influences? I mean, paint a picture for us. Luka at 6, Luka at 8, Luka at 12, before you and your family moved to Spain to join Real Madrid.
Yeah. So first of all, I would just say I started like watching basketball because my father played. So I was kind of born into basketball already. So from then on, when I was like 7, I started playing at school. Just till it was probably half an hour basketball. At 7, you don't really know what you're doing. But after that, I started playing for Olympia, and I was a ball boy for the national. I mean, not for national team, for the first team of Olympia. So probably that was just my excuse, to get some shots up, get on the court, play, watch the big guys play. And after every school, after school, every day I went on a court, just outside to have fun and play basketball. And then we come from 13. I went to Madrid.
Gotcha. So before you went to Madrid, it was about local play. It was about just sort of having fun with the ball. It was about, sounds like a little bit of inspiration watching the really good older players play, and that was enough of a situation to really kind of inspire you. So talk to me a little bit about also just embracing the mess. This is a term that you guys use in the handbook that you're distributing with your report to people. And how does embracing the mess tie into creativity? Like, how did you develop your creativity that shapes your game? I mean, Where did that come from?
Yeah, I would just say when I was little, I was trying some new things. Maybe a lot at the beginning, some coaches weren't really happy about it, but they let me be me, which is the most important part. And after a couple of those plays that I made, just a little bit different, they were on board with it. But the most important thing, they let me be me. And since the beginning, I was trying new things. In Slovenia, mostly, we did have some tournaments, in Italy, Croatia, uh, next to Slovenia. So, I was experiencing a little bit of everything.
Gotcha. And what about other sports? Did you play other sports? We've talked within Project Play, our signature initiative, about the value of experiencing other activities and then the transferable skills that come from playing games like soccer or tennis or otherwise. What did you play, and if that was valuable, what skills were you able to pull into basketball?
Yeah, definitely. Especially in school, we did a lot of sports. But mostly I would say I play football and tennis. Those two sports, which nowadays I think it really helped me about my footwork. But I used to play a lot of sports, especially sports with ball. But I did, which might surprise a lot of people. They don't know about me. I did 1 year of gymnastics, so uh, that was kind of different for me.
Until you fell on your head and said, "Yeah, we're done with that."
Yeah, probably 1 year was enough for me.
Definitely. All right, so let's talk a little bit about coaching, the value of coaching. What kind of coaching did you get, especially as you became a teenager, you moved to Real Madrid? What did they do well? What kind of environment was that?
Yeah, for me it was a great environment. Some strict environment, but very great. Because at the end of the day, they let me be me. Like I say, try some new things, play my own basketball, and allow me to fail. Like I said, I failed a lot of times, but after that, you learn a lot. So I had no stress playing basketball. It was fun. It was joy. So that's how that from that time, that's how I became a player I am now.
Yeah. Often as people get older in any sport, it gets more serious, it gets more focused on winning, and we can sometimes lose the joy and the imagination of playing the game, whether it be soccer or basketball or otherwise. But what I love about your game and Steph Curry's game is that joy and imagination seem pretty central to the idea of performance, right? So unpack that for me a little bit. And how did you keep the joy and imagination at the center of your game as it got more serious?
It's because I have fun playing it. I have joy. I love winning. Obviously, you can't win every game. So, from the games you lose, you can learn from it. There's never like really bad. You go back, you watch film, and you just learn from it. And the joy, like I was talking, I was a kid. It's the same joy now than like when I was a kid. So I just keep doing it. What I do, keep doing what I'm good at, and the joy was the main thing. I don't know how I kept it. Like a lot of people say, when you're done having fun, I'm done with it. So that's for sure 100% true for me.
Mhm. That's good. I have a theory. I want to bounce off of here that good sports systems don't make great players. What good sports systems do is just keep players with great potential from being ruined. They keep them from specializing too early in one sport or one position. They protect them from overuse injuries and maybe abusive or bad coaches. Good sports systems prioritize human and athletic development over winning, and they foster a love of game above all else. Does that sound right to you?
I wouldn't say right, uh, you know, but later it depends. I think on individual, what they want to achieve for themselves. Uh, there's a lot, they don't teach. I mean, they just really play games, and from my research, I think the most thing, there's a lot of things we need to focus on, but one thing is teamwork and winning. At the young age, you don't really need like winning, winning. You need to learn how to play basketball or other sports. So I think teamwork is a big word for young generations.
Gotcha. How does the European system differ from the U.S. youth basketball system? And I know you didn't come up through the U.S. system, but you've been in the U.S. for a while now. You've talked to teammates. From your understanding and from your report, which does a terrific job of comparing and contrasting, at least the Balkan system to the U.S. system, how do these two systems differ?
That word teamwork before. I think that's a big part on the European side. Obviously, the game in Europe is a little bit different rules, so it's obviously going to be different basketball. But I think that's the main word and the most important word.
Yeah, yeah. And there's also seems to be in Europe less of a focus on tournament-based play. In the U.S., it's a tournament every weekend and 6 games. Is that fair to say? It's less about tournaments in Europe than it is in the U.S.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's less games for sure. You practice way more than you play, so that's a big difference between US and Europe.
Gotcha. Good. Finally, what do you hope your foundation's report achieves? And how can people help?
Yeah, first, I think just for the kids, to enjoy basketball. Our research, showed that a lot of kids, the parents are pulling them away from sports, and it's not just about basketball. It's about all the sports, and sports is healthy. Sports is fun. So the main thing is just have kids have fun, joy. Uh, they're available to fail and don't worry about it. There's so that's the main thing. How can people help? Probably first read the report. I think it's an amazing and very interesting report. Uh, so and let the kids enjoy sports.
That's awesome. Listen, thank you for joining us, Luca. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
What you're trying to do and where you're going from here, and let us know. Let us know how we can help.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
All right. See you.
Thank you.
So, what I would like to talk with you guys about is how to scale those concepts across the US ecosystem and beyond with the guidance of you, our expert insider panel. Pleased to be joined by Sydney Colson, who plays for Athletes Unlimited, an all new model for pro basketball you should check out, and the Indiana Fever. Jeremy Goldberg, who is president of the software company LeagueApps and a member of Project Play's 63 by 30 Industry Roundtable. Craig Robinson, Executive Director of the National Association of Basketball Coaches, and Bill Duffy, Luka's agent and a member of the advisory board for the Luka Dončić Foundation that guided the development of the report. Our conversation will go till about 12:45, at which point we'll take a few audience questions. We invite you to share your questions in the Q&A function. Please also share your thoughts on social. Our team will be posting on X at Aspen Inst Sports. So, Bill, let's start with you. Why produce this report now? And what was the overall problem you're hoping it would address?
Yeah, well, it's great to be here. It really emanated from Luka's. This is a passion project for Luka. Obviously he's a professional basketball player. You cited his background and his upbringing, so he had a curiosity about the development of players here in America. A lot of his teammates in the NBA. So what he found was just there's so much pressure. There's not the emphasis on fundamentals, and he feels that's the same in Europe. That it's also kind of trending in that respect. But it's really just there's a whole lot here. But to have the effectiveness of revamping the whole experience, your identity when you're young is related to your success and the things that you're exposed to. So I think this is really just to make basketball better, to make it a good experience. The beauty of basketball is, it brings many cultures. It creates relationships and foundations of fundamentals that carry over onto your life. So I think you just want to be a contributor to improving the game of basketball and the experience from, the beginning of your career through as long as you play.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's a terrific report. So I'd actually like to structure today's conversation by the framework of Luka's report. And let's start with acknowledging the strengths of the U.S. system, because I think the report was actually very fair too. It wasn't just pointing out all the flaws. It recognizes there are some good things about our system. Number one, it's the land of opportunity. Number two, their role models are in reach. It is a proving ground like no other, and there are better opportunities for girls. Bill, in a nutshell, what did you mean here? I mean, how do you see the strengths of the U.S. system?
Well, talent. First of all, we have talent. There's a culture here of sports participation. Sports are probably as popular as anything in our country, but it's also that it's kind of an overload. The expectation, the pressure, the looming economic upside for being a professional. I mean, there's a lot for people to kind of comprehend. But it's really the difference between the success of Europe or international and versus the Americans is just the lack of development fundamentally. They are doing there what we were doing 20 years ago, coaching, fundamental teaching, and we don't do that. And it's really just these AAU programs, they play year round. There's really not an emphasis on development. It's more game and, your rankings, the social media profiles that you can create. You can create a whole persona on a highlight video, which isn't really developing your game. So I think it's just really stripping down the system and having more of a cohesive foundational structure with AAU, with the high schools, and coaching credentials. Anyone can just be an AAU coach, but there has to be some type of certification and coaching. Like, what are you doing this for? And that they have the resources. And I think that's what's going on in other parts of the world with these academies. In the U.S., it's really like the wild, wild west.
Yeah, as the report recognizes, the system challenges, and I think they're right, are the highlight culture, burnout and overplay, so the win now machine, the price of dreams, and then joy being stripped out of the game. I don't know, Sydney, how do you look at the U.S. system, strengths and the weaknesses?
Yeah, I think a big part of what Bill spoke to is definitely accurate. Like I remember, back when I started playing, I was like 6 years old, so this is like 95, and I started playing just because it was really fun. I was copying what my older brother did, so we're just playing basketball in the driveway, playing basketball with kids in the neighborhood. Like, it was so common to just be outside playing, and that's also something that has changed in the States. Like, kids are on social media or they're on iPads or watching TV like way more than we used to. We're outside till like the lights came on. My mom was, my parents are like, don't come back in until the street lights, like, be tired when you come in the house, and then it's time to do homework, eat, shower, go to sleep. So it was very like built into society, I think, when I was younger, to like play all the time. And that's where you found like a love of not just basketball, but other sports. We played kickball, baseball, everything. And so when you don't have the love of a sport, it's hard to like push through the hard times. And so now these kids are just feeling pressure of, okay, well, I need to get a scholarship. I need to, make money and for this, like for NIL, so I can help my family. Or, they're like, it's so intense at a young age now. It's like you're yelling at these kids and they're like 7. So it's like we can ease up a little bit. But I think there are so many good things like access to basketball, because it's cheap to be able to play basketball. You could do it anywhere. You can even create a goal yourself. There are role models like Bill was speaking to, like, that are very accessible. I know in the WNBA, it's very common. We stay after, sign autographs, meet fans, even here at Athletes Unlimited, in the league I play in. So it's like there are a lot of good things, but there are definitely things like that need to improve. And at the grassroots level, that is coaching credentials, that's teaching fundamentals and bringing back the enjoyment around the sport, so that when it gets hard, the kids can push through because it's something you enjoy so thoroughly.
Yeah. Craig, strengths and weaknesses of the system?
Yeah, I think the strengths are really well outlined, right? The one thing that I would say is a strength that most people look at as a weakness is that the women's ecosystem is underdeveloped. So that's an opportunity for all of us. So I think that's something we want to keep an eye on. And I've always talked about one of the strengths of playing basketball is that it's a lifelong sport that athletes can play well into adulthood. I mean, if I didn't become a coach, I'd still be playing. I stopped playing so I wouldn't get hurt. But my friends are still playing half-court pickup games to stay in shape. So that's good for society. But from a weakness standpoint, Tom, I agree with what both Bill and Sydney have said. But one thing that I think is missing is the education of parents and family members and those folks who are in the player's ear about what the expectations are. And I've been fortunate to have been a player, a coach, and worked in this business from high school all the way to the NBA. And let's face it, most players are not going to make it professionally. They're not going to be Sydney, right? They're going to be people we want to sort of be lifelong learners in the sport. And where we used to be, where the goal of development used to be personal development for your sort of development as a human, now it's more for money, glory, branding. I think Sydney said media, social media. I think we've gone away from that. And then the next point I want to make is the evolution of the game for the elite players. So the prep schools and the elite basketball academies, that's a threat, I think, because athletes are missing out on the well-rounded high school academic and social experience that you used to get from playing on a team. So I think those would be a couple of challenges that I'd be focused on.
Yeah. Jeremy, you work with the NBA and junior NBA and really helping think through how to build a better ecosystem. How do you come at this in terms of the strengths and challenges and how you fix them?
Yeah, Tom, well, first I'll say, as a lifelong Mavericks fan, if I'm in tears, it's not just about the youth basketball system, but I am committed to believe that what if we had a youth basketball system that could produce more Lukas in the United States? People understood team basketball and the fundamentals. Like that to me is my commitment in belief of the opportunity. I think the report does such a great job highlighting it. And so, in the opportunity to work with that we do with the NBA and lots of NBA teams, as well as, with whether it's MLS, whether it's NHL, MLB, and 60 other pro teams and thousands of grassroots organizations. If we start with the strengths, I would start by saying is there are thousands of operators that are out there that are deeply committed to youth basketball, and they care deeply and they're really passionate about it. And the engagement in particular of the NBA, the WNBA, the junior NBA, junior WNBA, you have the strength of the best basketball league in the world here, and what that means in terms of how they can use their voice, their guidelines, their programs and initiatives. And that also translates programmatically. I'll highlight, for example, the Golden State Warriors Academy that does extraordinary work. I'm planning on flying my kid out and spending a week in California this summer. So my kid can be trained where the Golden State Warriors get trained, and they'll meet Warriors players and with coaching and methodologies and everything else. So there are a lot of strengths here. But I noted in the report when it said that 71% of parents are satisfied with competitive options. My sense is I like my Palm Pilot until I saw what an iPhone was. And my view is that if you showed people what a better system could be, they could gravitate to it. And when we look at the challenges, I think a lot about a system and looking at the norms, the market, and the institutions, and the interplay of those things related to any challenge within a system and how you drive a challenge. And maybe just to highlight one, this norm around exposure over development. I think the report said that 43% of parents said that basketball focuses more on individual star power than team play, and that basically the game is about perception over performance. The logic that we are heading down is if you care about performance and exposure and you care about highlights, and that's what your system is designed for, then we will have a youth basketball system run by YouTube stars. And that's not just a hyperbole. There are literally YouTube stars that are now running basketball programs that are promising that teams will get 20,000 followers and players at these tournaments by how they'll promote and market it. That is the trend we're going. I think we need a system, and what this report captures so well is based on a system of development. And if you have recognize the norm of development and the value of actually understanding progression and advancement, not only will you have better basketball players, you'll have better humans. because you can also understand the progression that exists with the social emotional learning and everything else that comes from learning basketball. So I can get into all other kinds of systemic weaknesses around the market dynamics and institutions, but I think the report does such a great job of laying out those challenges and really is an invitation for what we can all do about it.
Let's stay with you for a minute here, Bill, and let's actually start to dive into some of the solutions in the report, right? So what I like about it is it's packaged very well with very simple wording. There are 8 different solutions that the foundation proposes going forward. The first one is the first core principle is development with purpose, right? And what this means is research across 2 continents points to a critical truth. While competition is essential to development, today's obsession with winning at all costs is undermining youth basketball. The evidence is clear. Programs that prioritize fundamentals over highlights and growth mindset over game statistics create more successful players in the long run, very similar to what Jeremy just said. When young athletes can explore their capabilities without fear of failure, they develop both skills and a lasting love of the game. Bill, can you elaborate a little bit more there and what that actually means, maybe practically, for coaches and program administrators?
Yeah, I think this is all great content. Everyone's contributing, but I think it gets down to the basics of the experience of competition, of self-esteem. Like we're lost in that because we're escalating things that should come later as far as your identity or monetization. So I think we just have to strip it down where you're experiencing the fundamentals. And the thing that Jeremy said is, parents have to understand you're building your young child into a human being, a well-rounded human being. So if you over-index on their identity with how they perform or, how much highlights or the social media clicks they have, it's really disjointed to their development. So I think we just have to slow things down. And, the problem too is, I think Sydney had mentioned like NIL, like these young athletes are being recruited by agents. I know I'm an agent, but at a higher level, but, to try to monetize on, their social media hits to earn money before they're really achieving. So you have to really just strip it down. And I think in the American system, it starts with the AU, the grassroots. The shoe companies are part of this as well because they fund a lot of these programs, but it's really just focusing on the fundamentals, the development, and the experience, having lifelong developmental cues that support your development as an individual. And we have to get back to having more balance, the educational part, the camaraderie, just focusing on those tenets, I think are the most important things that the report highlights. Now we have to create systems and create more awareness so we can put things in place here in the U.S.
Yep. One of the things the report recommends is in this particular section is equal playing time in the early years. And we've seen this is a real issue in the landscape, period. We recently ran a nationally representative survey through Project Play of sports parents, and we asked them what they care about, what they're spending, all sorts of topics. And playing time was a big issue, major issue for kids, really ages 6 to 17. In fact, only 11% of basketball parents say that playing time should only go to the best players. Craig, how do you look at the playing time question?
I mean, especially in early development, I think sharing the playing time is really important, irrespective of ability, right? Because you learn things when you play with kids who are sometimes better than you are and sometimes worse than you are. So I completely agree with that. And, I think Jeremy did a great job talking about sort of expectations of parents. I'll go back to this a lot on this panel. We just need we need if we're gonna start coaching these kids earlier, we need to educate them earlier and educate their families earlier on what the actual goals are. And I think until we do that, there's going to be a mismatch in expectations versus reality.
Yeah. Sid, does that resonate with you? And I'm curious to get your thought on the equal playing time question. At what age do we do equal playing time? When do we stop doing that?
No, I agree with what Craig said. I think that it's so possible to do it at a young age, especially with the other things that we mentioned, like winning should not be the most important thing when you're young. It's that we're trying to train and develop whole people. So not just athletes, but you need to learn at a young age about sharing, about encouraging others, about working hard, about having teammates that maybe are not as skilled, but you are still uplifting them. You're still sharing the ball with them. They look to you for things. It's about like, I think it can be a much more healthy and like symbiotic relationship at a young age. And then the older you get, you start to learn, like maybe some people are taking off more and you do start to separate and you're at an age where you can understand, okay, like I'm not as good as that player and I actually want them to play more than me because I want us to win. But like you start to feel that the older you're getting, not young and you're like, oh, why can't I even get a chance? I think that messes with kids' self-esteem. It can definitely produce more negative than positive. And if winning ultimately isn't the main goal when they're that young, then I'm not sure why playing time wouldn't be fair. So yeah, I'm pretty much in agreement with Craig on that part.
Gotcha. Bill, I know you need to jump to another meeting, but thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. Congratulations again on a terrific report. We're going to do everything within our little program to promote it and encourage adoption of it. So thank you for your contribution.
It's my pleasure. This is amazing what you guys do, and you have amazing panelists here. So this is really important output of information everybody needs to learn.
For sure.
Excellent. We'll be in touch. This is great. So let's talk a little bit more about some of the specific strategies that his report proposes going forward. Number one, obviously, or number two in the report was a team first mentality. Enough said there. Third was trained and incentivized coaches. That coaches shape more than players; they shape lives. Yet our research reveals a critical gap between this truth and today's reality. The evidence demands a new standard where every youth coach receives appropriate certification, ongoing training, and fair compensation. Because when coaches are equipped to succeed, players thrive. Craig, you're executive director of the National Association of Basketball Coaches. How do we move to an environment where coaches are trained and incentivized?
Yeah. Let me just start out by saying, Tom, I agree with the fact that all coaches should be certified. That's where we need to start right there. And I love the idea of specialized training tracks that the report talks about. But I would go further and recommend specialization for each level of development, kind of like what we do in school. We have elementary school teachers, we have high school teachers, we have college professors. There should be coaches who specialize in early athlete development. Everybody wants to be the Division I head coach or the WNBA coach, NBA coach, but we really need some coaches who want to be early development coaches. And we remember our coaches and having them sort of be trained in a philosophy and a practice that works for most players. I think that would transcend talent level, right? And so I'm all for it.
Great. Number four, Jeremy, I want to ask you about this, but number four in the Total Hoops approach is program continuity. The report recognizes that young athletes bouncing between teams and conflicting coaching philosophies miss crucial development opportunities. In contrast, programs that offer consistent coaching, stable teammate relationships, and a clear developmental pathway produce more complete players. How do you come at this, particularly the tournament operators and the club operators?
Yeah, and one thing I think Luka talked about is if you think about in Europe, you have a really club-based system, right? That is where the development happens. In the United States, there's actually an inversion of the power. The entities that have the most influence in the supply of youth sports programming in this country are the tournament operators. But those that have the biggest impact on development are actually the club system, the club teams themselves that are hiring the coaches, that are setting the methodology. So what ends up happening is the clubs are following the tournaments as opposed to the competition model flowing from the clubs. What happens in Europe is you have league-based play, less frequency, more practices. That's inverted in the United States. So one of the questions becomes is what's the way to kind of reorient the competition model at the right age-appropriate levels so that you have more a system that's more conducive to better clubs and better performance. As Craig was alluding to, like those ideas of focusing on that progression and the coaching standards, I think really relies on those clubs. I think the other thing that happens in the United States is that there is a bifurcation of those who are offering recreational or foundational programming and those that are offering the competitive programs. That is not the case, for example, in soccer. Most of the top soccer programs, for example, the clubs that are on MLS Next, have both recreational and competitive programs. So you have this methodology that is spanning that entire age group and ecosystem. But that doesn't exist in the United States right now. Most of those programs have that separation so that you don't have that continuity in that system, and you don't have the right kind of capacity within those club systems itself. I do want to shout out that the report highlights Pro Skills Basketball as like a great example, just of the privilege of sitting with their leadership team. When we started working with them at LeagueApps, I think they were in 4 cities. Now they're in 30 cities. They actually spend time, a lot of them, in Europe. They have people that direct coaching. They think a lot about this. And so there are really great programs. They happen to be an NBA flagship program doing it the right way. We just got to help more of those clubs. We need to have more of those clubs have more capability, more training, more support, design a system around them. That's how you get to that European model that Luka spoke about.
Right. You know, the fifth suggestion in the report is freedom to play. And Sid, I want to ask you about this, right? You know, this overemphasis on organized play versus pickup play, which has been core to basketball development in this country, just creativity or otherwise. That's particularly a challenge, right, with girls. I mean, girls sports in general, soccer is more there's more of an over-indexing on organized versus free play. How do we bring more free play into the girls' experience?
Yeah, I think like in large numbers, I think I heard this like last year that more girls were like dropping out of sports at a young age, which isn't a great thing because I look back to my time as a teenager and a kid, and I think sports are so important for girls because it helps with your self-esteem. It helps to have like built-in friendships or like more access to have friends that have this similarity with you immediately in the like shared interest in basketball or love of basketball. It helps to problem solve. It helps to be able to pivot when something gets hard and like figure out a solution so you become solution driven. But yeah, I think it's not like a super common thing for girls to just be like, oh, like you want to go play a game of pickup or to see each other at a gym and like want to go play basketball or something, whereas that's like super popular with guys. But I think it'll help too to have more women, like whether they're pro players or they played in college, to get back involved with like grassroots program, even if you're not able to lend like a lot of time, if you're able to lend advice on things that you would have done or just have some like a greater ease of access from younger players to college or professional players. I think that could really help with young girls seeing like, okay, well, this is a place that I could get to, but these are the steps that are kind of required for me to get to that point. And I think a lot of things are helping with that, especially with like pay increasing in the WNBA and with there being other leagues available stateside for girls to play. I think it's becoming more of a realization that, okay, maybe like I can do this and I can make a living from it. And so I hope that them seeing WNBA players and seeing like our league at AU, seeing Unrivaled, seeing all these different models will encourage young girls to get involved with sports and to keep playing it as much as they can.
Yep. I want to get to audience Q&A here, but before we do, I want to recognize the other three pillars in the Total Hoops approach. One is smart development guidelines. That just means understanding what's age appropriate, natural growth patterns. 6 is not 16. So, don't have kids specialize too early. For instance, multi-sport play becomes really important there as well. 7th is embracing mess and joy, which just is mistakes are okay, creating this environment where joy balances discipline, and the messy process of learning is celebrated, not fear. And eighth, and maybe most important, is life beyond basketball. Right, the basketball is a laboratory for life skills, and when programs intentionally develop coaches who can promote character alongside crossovers, then we just build better human beings who move into adulthood. So, Sid, one question from the audience here is burnout. Just how do we? This is becoming a problem now in basketball. How do we push back against this trend of kids getting to be 18, 19, or even sometimes 13, 14, 15, and they're kind of done with the game, even if they're still playing.
I feel like we've all touched on it with some of our answers from different questions. It's like if there's that love of the game at a young age, just like with anything in life, if I love something, like I'm more willing to push through hard times because I've seen the good that comes from it. I've seen what it's produced in me. So that's one thing. I think when the pressure is taken off from parents, from coaches, from social media, and the effect that that can have on young kids' self-esteem, I think that also makes it easier to keep playing and not be looking at the product of a game, like the win or the loss, but like what I'm gaining from being in this environment. I think that's super helpful. I also think, having multiple passions, like just because you are interested in basketball, it doesn't mean that it needs to be the only thing that you do. Like, I think that's why the arts are really important. Like, that's why STEM is really important. Like, have other things that you care about so that you're not putting all your eggs in one basket, especially. I know that that was really important for me as a young player, like to figure out from my parents, like, what else do you like? And like, I like acting, I like these other things. So figure out what else you love. And so it's not as detrimental to your confidence and to, maybe what you want to do after basketball when basketball doesn't go your way. Because as you said, Tom, it's a small percentage of players that go from high school to college, that go from college to pro. And so have other interests so that you don't feel like this is your everything, that sports your everything. It can be unhealthy when it is.
Mm-hmm. Another question from the audience, on this one's for you, Craig, is what certification programs currently exist for coaches?
There's certification in a lot of different sports. I would say in basketball, it's very little. You can be certified through USA Basketball and their organization, but you don't need to be certified to be a grassroots coach. You need to be certified, but it's very minimal. Unlike, and I think Jeremy talked about this in the pre-production, is I think soccer does a great job of certifying anybody who's going to talk to or coach a kid from the start of AYSO soccer all the way up. You have to be certified, and I would love to see that in basketball, particularly at the early stages of your development. Once upon a time, our coaches were our teachers, so they were certified teachers and at least had a structured upbringing in how to teach and the different way kids learn. And I think given and Sydney talked about burnout, given the burnout aspect of kids these days, I think coaching has to be a profession. You can't have just me coaching my kids, right? Because there is a conflict, and I'm either too hard on my kid or I'm too easy on my kid. So, for the folks on the webinar, even if you're not required to be certified in coaching, I would get certified in one of from one of the places you can get certified. USA Basketball is one. And like I said, if you're coaching your kids in soccer, they have a terrific certification program that I've taken and enjoyed.
Yeah. Jeremy, what's the role of different organizations and making it happen, moving to a certification environment, maybe treating basketball coaches as qualified professionals, and just like changing the incentives and the disincentives in the system. I mean, what's the role of USA Basketball? What's the role of the NCAA? What's the role of the NBA? What's the role of these Nike and Under Armour and the shoe companies? I mean, what's the ask?
Yeah, two thoughts on this. One is, I do think that there's a lot of change that could be driven by clubs who just decide to do it differently, right? To lead, not follow. In many cases, I feel like people are in jail, but there's no lock on the door. And so I think that more people, that organizations that are committed to doing the right thing, people will follow. I saw this firsthand where I'm in a league, I'm coaching. I'm the most experienced coach in the league, which says something about the league, because this is my first time coaching basketball. And all that we play games twice a week. There's no practices, and that doesn't ring right to me. So I got one of the partners we work with at LeagueApps, a great group called IBCA, to come in and run a practice. And I got them to cancel the games one night, and they ran a 90-minute practice. And it was amazing. It was amazing for the parents. It was amazing for the players. There was no gameplay. And it's like, if you show them a different way, they'll be a different way. Now, they said that this was great. We should just do this next year. I can't get them to cancel more games yet this year. But like, there is a better model. And when you try to think about that top-down change in those players, I think there's two models we should be looking at. One is the education system. I think what Craig is describing is exactly right. You can't just because you like math doesn't mean you just got to go in your kid's classroom and teach math, right? There's standards, there are expectations. If we believe basketball and sports is such an important role, and then there should be the accreditation, the certification, the requirements that exist in education. And then I think soccer is a great model. In 2007, U.S. Soccer launched the Development Academy. If you listen to the problems that existed that they would try to solve, too many games, too many injuries, not coaching standards, not certification, right? Too much expense. And they took a system that became MLS Next that was very much centered on high levels of club standards, where clubs were admitted in based on those standards, coaching level requirements at various levels in progression that Craig spoke about earlier, a competition model that was league-based as opposed to tournament-based that took the number of games from 80 to 30. So there was more time for practice and development. And then a lot of focus on coach development and investment at the club level. And so what MLS Next is doing, and they just recently announced an expansion to the next level, is a model that can work. And basketball has an incredible amount of advantages when you name those players. And I look at some of the things that the NBA and the junior NBA has already done, and you see that the opportunities for the impact that those can have. And I think there's a lot to build on if we look at that education and we'll look at the soccer as a model to follow up.
Gotcha. Well, Sid, I know you've got to jump, so I want to thank you for joining us today. I appreciate your comments, and we will be in touch with you. And good luck with Athletes Unlimited. I think it's fantastic.
Thank you. Nice to meet you all. Thank you.
See you, Sid.
All right.
See y'all.
Finally, let's talk about the role of government, right? So when we compare systems in Europe to here, the government plays a different role. We have very much a disjointed system here. It's not like we have a Ministry of Sports or some entity to coordinate all this stuff. Over there, there's a more coherent system to get the coaches trained, to fund the clubs, to make things age appropriate. It's not perfect at all, clearly. And it definitely differs from country to country. But in the U.S. here, what is the appropriate role, if any, for the government? Is it like minimum standards around coaches having background checks or abuse training, or is it paying for background checks? Is it like, what makes sense? Jeremy?
Yeah, Tom, I think there's a couple ways of looking at this. One is there's a resource question, which is that ultimately, how can we make sure the resources exist for organizations to do the right thing, right? How do we make it easier for them to make sure that there's safety, that there's compliance, that coaches are trained and supported, as well as those organizations that are assuring access that otherwise wouldn't be there. And I know we've had an opportunity to work through with the Aspen Institute, with the Play Sports Coalition, to try to unlock more dollars and more funding. And I think that part of the question is that we don't put enough resources into this. That youth sports has so many benefits, it doesn't fit a category. It's not education. It's not health and wellness. It's not leadership development. It's all of it. And I think as a result, it's suffered through a lack of resources. And I think the second is, when it comes to governance, I think what is the right amount of incentives and sticks related to that? What are the ways that you're empowering the ability for there to be sort of minimum standards related to safety, or minimum standards related to some kind of certification? How do we professionalize coaching in this country? I would think would be really good places to look. But this is not going to be Europe. I don't think we're going to be able to evolve to that model. I think a lot of this is about actors getting together to realize their own agency to drive change. If we just reimagine what is possible, as opposed to simply all look at each other and feeling overwhelmed by the inertia of the status quo.
Yeah. Greg, any final thought on that?
Well, I mean, Jeremy has sort of summed it up perfectly, and it's got to be, you know, private backed. You know, it's just our government is shrinking now, as we all see, and I would love to see a commissioner of United States basketball, and I think I love the folks at USAB, but they're focused on competition and development of the teams that they're playing. They just need more resources so they can build out, with the help of the NBA, a developmental program for all. And I think, to Jeremy's point, lead and we shall follow.
Gotcha. All right. Well, listen, Jeremy, Craig, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. For everyone out there, if you would like to watch a replay of this event, we will cut it up and put the Luka interview in the right spot, piece it all together, make it a better watch. We have that available. Please keep an eye out for that. Also, if you want to keep talking about how to build a youth-centered sport ecosystem in general that serves all youth, well, join us at the Project Play Summit, March 24th and 25th at UC Berkeley. Thrilled to announce today that our MC will be ESPN's Malika Andrews, who is host of NBA Today and NBA Countdown. Keynotes will include best-selling author Michael Lewis, early bird rates, and February 28th. Summit sells out every year, so reserve your seat today. Final housekeeping item, keep up with the latest from our Sports and Society program by registering for a newsletter. Visit as.pn/pp subscribe to sign up. As a subscriber, you will learn about resources and events, including our next Future of Sports conversation and our work with Project Play. So thank you again for joining us today. Be good and see you next time.